Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resourceful Humans. I am your host, Corey Haber, and today I have with me Tiffany and Keith, both very experienced in the HR profession and very different industries and backgrounds. So I'm excited to hear their opinions on the new workplace, which is our episode today. Thanks for coming on today, you guys. Good to have you.
Thanks for having us.
And so let's just jump right in. I'm really curious to hear, everything you have to say as far as what's changing in HR, especially with the pandemic. But especially, what do you feel the future of work is going to look like post-COVID? And we know what it looks like now, but also how do you feel like it's going to look after this? And how are things changing today because of the pandemic?
Would you consider that a question? You want to jump right in on that, or did you have a specific question you want to ask?
Well,
that was pretty broad-based there.
Okay,
so crack at it if you want.
Okay, I'll make it more specific. So I want to know what you feel like is different in specific, mostly as far as employees. What's different as far as HR? What's changing for HR as far as how do you help the employees while they're working remote? Is that more helpful?
Yes, it is, and I'll certainly jump in first if you don't mind, Tiffany.
Sure.
Certainly, employees themselves are feeling much more independent these days. They've been rallying. Employees in general have been rallying for many years that they want to do their work and be allowed to do it, not necessarily overly supervised. Now that many people are working from home, that's sort of been enforced for the last 6 months now. My perspective is a little different because not only do I have the view as HR for my current organization, but my organization brings services to many others in many different industries, and I get a very close look at that because I talk to all of their HR leaders as well. So although I happen to be in the healthcare industry working for a mobile dentistry practice called FlossBar, we also do services for many, many other companies across the United States. And resoundingly, I'm seeing a lot of employees spread their wings, if you will. They now know they can work from home. They now know they can work, and work from home is a broad concept. Work remotely. They don't have to be at the office. And I was worried in April and May, when we had only been stay at home, if you will, for a couple of months, that the employers would be like, okay, I'm holding my breath, but I got to get my people back so I can have them under my thumb. But now it's been 6 months. And I think that the employers are really starting to understand, hey, there's productivity going on. As long as I stay in close contact remotely, it can work this way. And oh, by the way, maybe I don't have to spend millions and millions of dollars on real estate the way I used to. So the future, if you will, isn't going to be everybody work from home, but I think there'll be a lot more leniency in that regard, a lot more willingness to go, and there's been proof that it can work, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I agree with you. I think that there's been trust built now. So before, where people, were like, oh, I don't know if I can trust my team or know what they're doing. If I don't have eyes on it, I may not be able to control it as much. They're having to release some of that control now and really trust their teams. I think that that's so important. Not only is it important to our people, but it should be a sign of like, hey, we can be effective as long as we have the right people in the positions and the right people in the right positions, and the right leadership. I think that that's so important to make sure you still have leaders that are saying, hey, turn on your camera. I mean, sometimes we don't want to, and sometimes we don't want to put in the effort, but I think that visual connection is so important, and just to make sure they stay connected. Don't make people feel like they're on an island by themselves. And I agree with you, though. I think that it's definitely shown that it can be effective if done correctly. And I also agree that I don't think that every company everywhere is now going to move to 100% remote. I know with the business I work for now, it's just not possible. We have some functions that just have to be done in the office. And of course, you would miss some of that in-house collaboration moving to 100% remote workforce. But the flexibility that it's given people, and like I said, I think it's so empowering, and I think it's important, especially as we move into a more technology-driven society. So I think that I agree, though. I think that it's a huge benefit to both the employer and our employees to let them know that there's trust and that it can be done.
So, Tiffany, I know you mentioned that some people can work from home, some or work remote, some can't. How is your company evaluating whether a position could be remote, or maybe it needs to be a mix of both, or maybe it can't be remote at all?
We definitely have all three. So we have people that are working 100% remotely and can do that effectively. We have people that really need to check in the office and be available for certain things in the office, and they're doing, a split of that. But we also do have positions, for example, our accounting team. What they do, they just have to do it in the office. The equipment that they use, print checks and everything. Our freight audit and payment, work for a transportation company now, or a 3PL company. And it's there's just some things that just can't be done. I think right now the most important thing is allowing as many people as we can to work remotely, so that the people that have to be in the office there's limited exposure for them. And I think that's, a little bit, we actually implemented our own phases, regardless of what the counties and states are doing, of how we're going to return to work. And we're still in phase 1. I mean, we're trying to keep that at 25% in our offices, because those people have to be there. So obviously there's some perks. Sometimes they get lunches and things like that, but unfortunately, we are not in the position to have 100% remote, but just doing everything we can to support them. And of course, there's a lot of flexibility there. If they have school-age children and things like that, we're working with them as much as possible.
So, and you bring up something very interesting, if I could jump in. Every company is going to be different. The whole concept of child care, or I might add elder care, those are playing into whether or not people can be remote, not because, that positions were there before, but now there's this disconnect between whether or not kids are going back to school or being at home and remote, and parents being stuck. They want to go back to work. They want to be physically in the office, but they might not be able to because their kid is homeschooling. Because the locality, my locality, we're not going to be going back to the classrooms until November 9th because of our numbers. And our numbers are actually pretty good. So there's a lot of different factors going on. The flexibility has got to be mandatory. I think the 25% is admirable that you're even trying to do that. I think it's also teaching organizations what really can be remote and what needs to be in the office. Not to pick on you, Tiffany, but you brought up something very interesting, that people have to be in the office to do certain accounting functions, writing checks and such. And actually, I don't need to point it out, that all of that can eventually be automated and probably wind up saving the company money by automating it. So this is sort of it opens the door to examining the questions that your company may not have thought to look at before. But that's a lot of companies out there are like that. So there's a lot of silver linings here. We don't want to have been working from home or stay at home for 6 months, but there's a lot of interesting opportunities that companies are now realizing they could look at and not perish while they're examining those things.
Right. I agree. And I think that you make an excellent point. When we were looking at the return to work phases and how that would look, just pretty much just assumed immediately, this is just something we can't do right now. But I think in doing that and making sure, like I said, everyone else that can work remotely and protecting those people as much as possible. But I agree, it's bringing up conversations that we need to evolve. We need to make sure that if for some reason, God forbid, this happens again in 2 or 3 years, or hopefully not ever, but there more prepared. We know we can only make improvements. We can only move forward. But I agree. I think like you said, it's just initiating a lot of conversations and what can we do better, what worked well. And I think, just to kind of dive deeper into the people that have school-age children at home and like you said, elderly care. One of the things that we did, we're not bringing those individuals back until phase 3. So at 100% of the AFS phase, we're letting them, work from home and making it work regardless of what their function is. So including individuals that live with frontline healthcare workers to limit the cross-contamination and exposure, those people and people with underlying conditions. So those individuals and our teammates will not be required to even think about coming back to the office until everything reopens. So I think that it's important. That's another thing to say, like, hey, we care about you. We recognize you're in this category. And, individuals that live with frontline healthcare workers, that's just keeping AFS as safe as possible at this point, or, keeping the company as safe because, those are the people that are exposed to it, or, if they have COVID patients and things. So just really breaking it down of what made sense. But if God forbid this happens in the future, we will know what we need to do better. And it's starting those conversations now.
I think I think flexibility is one of the biggest concerns in HR and for employers across the country right now, because the biggest concern right now, I believe, is if they do have school-age children that are at home, how do you make the employees' schedules flexible enough to where they can still accomplish their tasks and at the same time assist the children with the homeschooling? How do you do that flexible scheduling? I think that's where a lot of people are stuck.
Well, and on that point, I think that this is the greatest statement against 9 to 5 that we've ever had. It's convinced many, many employers that the job needs to get done. If you go back to the whole concept of exempt versus non-exempt, what does exempt mean? Exempt from overtime, you're getting paid for the job you do, not the hours you work. And that's really important. You're looking at a job and you're saying, get it done. I don't care where you get it done. I don't care when you get it done. Get it done. This is what I need you to get done as the employer. So it can get done at 7 o'clock at night. It can get done at 11 o'clock at night. It can get done on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning. As long as you do what I need you to do, and that's what we've been railing for years about, measuring productivity on getting the job done, not necessarily showing up and sitting there and looking pretty for 8 hours a day and not necessarily getting anything done. And a lot of people do that. And this really shines a light on it. It changes the whole dynamic and makes the world think in terms of measuring on productivity as it should have been, whether a person is exempt or non-exempt.
Right. And I agree too. I think that there are some positions that are metric driven. So you already have those in place of, I just need to get this done on, in this amount of time. But I also, when you first asked the question, I was thinking my first response in my head was, it depends, which is something that Keith has brought up before about any HR question, because it's all, to me, sometimes it truly is just case by case basis. You want to take care of your people, and some people may have other support at their house. They may have family or friends and things like that. But there are those individuals that don't have anyone else. And those people, that's when you take that. It's not black and white anymore. You take those, extensive measures to help them out, because if they're a good employee and a good performer, you obviously want to do everything you can to keep them, to make them comfortable, to make sure that they feel valued. And that's something so small that the company can do. Just to do a little bit extra for that person to make them see we're doing what we can because we know that you work hard for us. So I in my head, my brain started wrapping around like all the individual cases, and obviously being fair, but not necessarily one size doesn't fit all. So one person's situation and solution would be so different from somebody else's.
I really agree with that. I guess the one thing I'm curious of, and I'd love to hear your opinions, is, how are you fair and at the same time judging whether someone has a flexible schedule, one doesn't, based on their home life. How do you do that in a fair way? Because they could have the same job, same task that they need to accomplish, but then one is required to work certain hours during the day and one is not. So how do you approach that so that it does feel fair for everybody?
I would suggest that everyone has the option of the flexible schedule. Some people just may not need it. You know, if it's a job, look, I'm passionate about what I do. I don't look at what I do as a job. I look at it as a lifestyle choice. But some people, it's a job. Right. And if they can get it done, if they can get their whole job done in 4 hours, you know, between 9 and 1, 9 a.m. and p.m., well, then that's thrilling. That's great. Then they can spend 20 hours a day having fun, whatever. But other people may need to spread it out to accommodate childcare, elder care, other issues going on in the house, other issues going on in their lives, whatever. But everybody who has that particular job has the option, or should have the option, as Tiffany's pointing out, of spreading it out to times when it makes sense for them, when they can provide the same productivity. Maybe it's at different hours a day. Now, some jobs, of course, aren't like that. Assembly line jobs or customer service, telephone answering jobs.
Yeah.
There are certain times when you want to be flexible, but you might not necessarily be able to. Hey, the job is 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the phone answering customer service calls from clients. Can you do it? If you can't, you can't. Maybe there are other things we can have you do, but there are some jobs that don't have that flexibility. Employers just need to make sure that they define those jobs carefully, because most jobs are. There are ways of doing it in other times. I'm sorry, Tiff. I think
Oh, no, you're fine. I just wanted to expand on that a little bit. I think that that's where it comes into play to separate the position from the person. So if you're offering flexible schedule, that means that job can do that. That means everyone in that position should be offered the same. And that is the only way to be fair. But if you have an individual that, you know, in my mind, when I brought up that example, it was someone, you know, not in the same position, two completely different departments and everything. And I think that in those cases, this position there might be more flexibility to it, where you can offer those things. But if someone else needs it in that moment, you try to make it work. I mean, I think if you're trying and you're showing effort, because that's what we expect from our employees, that's what they want to see from us. So if they're coming to you with a special request saying, this is the position I'm in, and if you immediately say, nope, it's in our policy that we said, you know, we're not doing this, not only does that show them I don't matter to you, but it's also, I mean, you're really backing yourself in a corner there where you're not going to be able to be fair and consistent with the next person because, you know, you like them better, or, you know what I mean? So I think that it's so important to separate the person and the position. And again, if it's something you're offering if this position is eligible for this benefit or this flexibility, every person in that role should have that same benefit.
100% agreed.
I agree. And I think that's a good way to make it fair. Going towards that flexible scheduling, you know, from seeing it from the employee's perspective, and I know this isn't specifically related to their job, but a lot of people do enjoy their job because of the people they work with and the people they get to see every day. They do become friends with those people, and they enjoy going in because they get to see everyone. So with the flexible scheduling, with the working remote, I mean, how do you make up for that loss? And how do you, and honestly, I think a lot of employees now are choosing that mixed schedule of coming in a couple days of a week and working remote just so they can have that social interaction. So how do you make them happy as far as socially and mentally when this remote environment's going on?
Well, I think that, so I'm a big fan of, like, right now we're having conversation, we're all in completely different places, and you know, we're connected in that way. And I know it's not the same as in person, but to me, so many people are utilizing the virtual meetings. I think it's so important for companies and organizations to offer some sort of communication tool whether, so it has that ability to connect that way. I agree, though. I've even seen a lot of polls on LinkedIn where people are like, would you prefer 100% work remote or 100% return to the office or a mix of both? And most of the time, the primary answer is a mix of both. And quite frankly, mine is too. I think that there are days where I am so productive because it's just me. I'm knocking things out at my house, but I do miss that interaction. I miss just being able to walk around and ask people how they're doing. And I think I think that it's a little disadvantage just from an HR professional, because that's part of what we do. We connect with people, we build relationships with people. So that way, when, things come up, they already know us. The first time they're talking to us is not something bad or something benefit related or anything like that. Our job is to try to connect with as many people as possible. The company I work for now, we have we have other locations outside of the corporate headquarters office, and we hire remote people. And so we already have some experience with having to engage, those individuals. And we've done a few things to do that. We have our CEO and VP of HR have made videos to address all of our employees with where we're at with the return to work planning, which I think has been so helpful to see that support from the top. We have actually made several videos and asking for people to send in pictures. A lot of the spring graduates were unable to have spring ceremonies. And so we asked for people to send in pictures, and we've posted it on our social media page, and people sending in pictures of their kids. And I actually graduated, so I got to be part of it too. And it was really cool though, because people in our New York office were like, you graduated, that's so cool. And it's just to have that connection. We also asked recently people for pictures of their pets, like show us who's keeping you company at home. And I was amazed when we sent that video out, how many people sent emails saying, this made my day. Just to feel connected in some way. So I think that those little things that don't cost anything can end up being the most impactful things that you can do for people. But obviously the best is just in person, talking to someone. But the first time that happens, people are gonna have to tell me to be quiet, because I'm gonna be so excited to be able to be around other people again. But I think that just doing everything you can to stay connected is just so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I could echo your words, but I'll add to it that not only do I do human resources for FlossBar, but I also run a rather large networking group for human resources practitioners, which is what brought us together, I believe. And in some ways, it's killing me that all of our events are virtual. I'm a shaking hands and kissing babies kind of guy. I like to be in person. I'm a big hugger. I hug everybody. So yeah, I'm going to kind of lose my marbles when we finally get back, whenever that is. And, and I get to see people and be in the same place with them. But it's critically important to do things that keep people talking and keep people learning about each other. Not just, hey, these two people do this function or they do this function in the company, but who they are and what they are personally. But before the pandemic started, people hated video conferencing. Nobody even knew what Zoom was except for the college students. And people were uncomfortable in front of cameras, and everybody had to have that plain background, and they were worried about what they wore and all that stuff. Now, nobody cares if your cat walks across the picture. In fact, they
encourage it.
They encourage it, right? If a kid, a 4-year-old kid walks in and says hello to the everybody on the screen, we all love it. People are dressing in sweatsuits and sweatpants and stuff like that. If they're showing pants, they're not as worried about what they wear and what's in the background. We're learning about how we live. We're learning. That's my kitchen behind me. I don't care. And nobody seems to mind that sort of thing as long as it isn't overly cluttered. I mean, you want to be professional, reasonable. But it's so lowered the barriers, all the discomfort. And by the way, the job seekers in particular who were being forced to do video interviews before the pandemic, they have no excuse now. Now they're pros at it because they're doing this all the time. So everybody's up to date on this sort of thing, and we're all much more comfortable in front of a camera. Talk about a silver lining.
That's true.
The companies themselves, to get back to the question, is to utilize what we have at our disposal do things to make sure that we humanize each other and build those relationships, even if they are through technology. Tiffany, all the things you described, it sounds like you're doing a fabulous job in your company. Absolutely. Very, hats off to you.
Thank you. It's, a lot of people, and honestly, I think that suggestion came from one of our employees can we celebrate this? And we're like, yes, absolutely. Let's do it. So it just, I agree with you 1,000%. Though I think it not only humanizes, it personalizes us. Seeing C-suite executives and their backgrounds in their kitchen, like just in a sweatshirt. I mean, it's just so different now. And it makes us all a little bit more approachable, even though it's virtually. So I think that there's been a lot of benefits to, like you said, silver lining. And obviously none of us wish this to happen, but maybe it will push us to be more comfortable in a lot of ways that we weren't.
And I think this goes back to what Keith said. I mean, I think for an employer to be successful in this remote environment is to keep in mind that it's not just a job for a lot of people. This is their life. I mean, a lot of their career also includes their groups of friends, and even though the employer, their main concern is the business, I mean, it should also be just as much the happiness and mental health of the employees, which, like it or not, their job is just as important as their lifestyle. And I think realistically, now that we have the technology to work remote, the office space for quite a while has been there just because of that, wanting to be social, keeping people engaged with each other. We for a while have not needed, we really didn't need the office space for a lot of tasks to be done because people are able to have that technology at home. I think that's why a lot of employers have kept their office space for that in-person interaction, less for the fact of accomplishing tasks. But, correct me if you disagree, but that's just the way I see it is this could have been done a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, that goes without saying, but I don't want to drag this into a negative territory. Yes, I wrote something on somebody's LinkedIn post a couple of days ago that apparently everybody finds to be profound, and that is they don't put up a traffic light at an intersection unless somebody dies. They don't, in the same sense, we didn't think that people could work remotely until 180,000 people died because it was a pandemic. We don't necessarily take actions until we're forced to do it, until human lives, if you will, are sometimes sacrificed. And here I am dragging this pall of cloud over our conversation.
It got really dark.
I don't want to do that, but
it's a valid point.
Business community doesn't let go of old practices until they're almost forced to do it. Well, I keep talking about silver linings, and this is the business community was forced to examine and look straight into the face of remote work and how more things can be done without being in the office. And yet, I think that the business community wouldn't let go and would drag everybody back to the office until they look at that bill they get for the real estate they're using. And for the last 6 months, they've been paying this big bill. Most of that work's been getting done. In fact, a lot of it's been getting done. We learned a lot of new things. I've been paying this insane bill for my real estate. Why am I doing that? And that is what's going to push, if you ask me, that's what's going to push the business community to realizing that it makes sense to send some people off and to shrink the amount of real estate that they are leasing, which most organizations lease, they don't buy. It makes a lot more sense to them. They finally have been forced into that analysis that you and the three of us could have told them 30 years ago or more. Well, now we're here. Now it makes sense. And I think that's the thing that's going to push everybody over the edge, and we're going to have much more flexible schedules in many industries. Probably not all of them, but many of them.
Yeah. I would like to add too, there is something to be said. I know we've brought it up before, but just about that in-person collaboration and different teams being able to partner on projects together in person. It's just, it's a different flow, I think sometimes. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I just wanted to point that out because I know that is a big reason why some people still do have offices too, because I think before they thought that it couldn't be done, but even now that it can be, they don't want it to take away from, especially when you're training new people and things like that, you want them to be in that environment where they feel like, hey, you can just get up and ask. And right now I feel like that the more comfortable you get with reaching out virtually and communicating and things like that, it might change. But I think that that's a big reason why the organization I work for now didn't really want to offer it even before all this happened, just because the fear of losing some of that collaboration. So
I would suggest that no one thinks that the office space should go away. No one is suggesting, few are suggesting, but not many, that we should get rid of offices entirely and always work from home. Mm-hmm. There is such a value in in-person collaboration. There is, especially at the beginning of employment. But when people are up and running and experienced, to lessen the amount of time that they're in the office can only benefit the individual and the company. Here in the Northeast, I'm 50 miles outside of New York City. I am, instead of going to New York every day and then coming back, which is it's typically between an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half each way. So you're talking about 15 hours a week. By the way, I'm probably working that time from home instead. So the amount of the amount of time that the productivity that I've put forth increases by that amount. And that used to be built into my work week, right? And I don't even go into the office every day. I mean, there's so many people who I know in this area of New Jersey where I live that commute an insane amount of time, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours each way. Instead, they're getting up at the same time. They're working from the time they would have gotten on the bus or the train or whatever, or, into their car. And then they're not shutting it off. We had a conversation offline about how the psychological signal of when to start working in a day and when to stop, by getting into your mode of transportation and then getting into it at the end of the day, we don't get into the mode of transportation, so our signals are gone.
Yeah, gone.
Productivity is through the roof in some cases because of that.
Yeah.
And it's lawyers should be thrilled. They should absolutely be thrilled. Mass transportation systems probably aren't very happy, but the employers have got to be thrilled.
Yeah. I think that another thing too is just to make sure that there is still that work-life balance, and it's so important and mostly driven by the employees, but and I've seen a lot of memes and things that have come up that says it's no longer working from home, it's living at work. Yeah. So I think that it's so important to make sure that you're not making it a requirement. Obviously, I know that you can make it a requirement without saying that it's a requirement as a leader, and I know that. But I think that employees really need to make sure they're still keeping that balance, and leaders making sure that they understand that balance needs to exist, because that's so unhealthy to not be able to, and I've seen so many videos of people like, all right, my day is over, and they shut their laptop and they turn and watch TV, that closure and that time, okay, this is now my time, is important for their mental health and well-being.
I personally can speak to that, because I used to everything I did was in person. My meetings, any presentations, anything I did was in person. And that time between the transportation to each destination, just going out to lunch with people, that was part of some of the most enjoyable part of my day, getting that time to socialize and kind of relax. And, even though I'm at work, I'm also still not just working all by myself. And now I've noticed that the expectation of completing more it's there because I'm by my computer, not necessarily by an employer, but just for myself. I expect to complete more, and I end up doing more because it's right there in front of me and it's so easy to access. But I have honestly lost a lot of that work-life balance because it's very it's difficult to do it on your own. A lot of people, I don't even think realize this, but they had that work-life balance because of what Keith said. They had a time that they had to arrive, they had a time that they left, and they were forced to have that work-life balance. A lot of people don't know how to do it without that being forced to start and stop time.
Well, let me let you feel a little bit better about what you just said. I'm going to go back to a conversation I had about 20 years ago with a guy I was working for back then, this guy named Robert Blinken, who ran the teleconferencing company I was the HR director for at the time. And he said something very profound. And obviously, this is 20 years before the pandemic and 20 years before we were forced to look at work from home and all that. But he said to me, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle choice. When you join an organization, you're choosing the lifestyle you're going to follow. If you're passionate about what you do, and I've gotten to know both of you a little bit, and I think that you're both extremely passionate about what you do, which is why I think that we click as a group. And as a lifestyle choice, you're not necessarily working every single minute from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. You're working some of the time, you're doing other things some of the time, you're producing some of the time, you're socializing some of the time. The lines may have blurred as to when to start and stop, but we also don't feel the pressure necessarily to produce every single minute of the day anymore because we know we're putting in what seems to be that extra time. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't necessarily feel bad about it because, let's face it, what I've come to know about the two of you, you work 24/7. You don't actually shut off. And I'm like that too. I'm always thinking about it, but trust me, I have a lot of fun as well along the way.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's
I agree with that.
It's the difference in it being a job for someone versus being their lifestyle and passion, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there are too many people out there who it is a job for. But hopefully this shines a light on some of that and helps them move towards something that might be a bit more passionate for them.
So last question for you. I do feel like a lot of employers don't know how to create that environment that's not just based around work right now. They've never really had to do it before. It created itself before. Do you have any suggestions on how an employer or HR team can find good, like the creative ways, like you were mentioning, Tiffany, about the sending in the pictures of the dog, that came from an employee. So do you feel like asking the employees is really the best way right now to figure out what's going to create that work-life balance for them when they're all remote?
I don't think it hurts. I mean, if you want information, go to the source and figure out what they need. I think that we can only do so much. We're all different. We all have different things that are, needs and wants in our lives. But I think from an employer standpoint, if you're listening to your team, I know, people, there's a mixed feeling about suggestion boxes or comment boxes and things like that. But I think that just listening, I mean, it's such a powerful thing to make someone feel like, okay, we get thousands of emails a week. I mean, probably just sitting here, probably 50 new emails, but just that you took the time, you did, and they're not small things. I mean, it took time to make videos and, HR work with marketing, and the graduate one was actually the one that came from our employee. The dog or the pet picture actually came from our CEO. So I just think that, and that's really cool too. And to just be able to have someone in our leadership position that supports those types of things. And like I mentioned, the video about keeping transparent of where we are. It makes people feel connected right now when they don't on a daily basis. And that is something it's hard to navigate through, but I don't think it hurts to ask. I think if you want to know what people need and want, what can we do to support you right now? I mean, when we first went to remote work, we sent out trainings that we thought would be helpful to our managers and people that have never been in that situation before. Immediate feedback, this was helpful. Like I'm in uncharted territory right now. And I think that it's those little things that we can do, not only for our employees and our leaders, but from an HR perspective. I mean, we're always trying to do everything we can to stay connected, but it's important for us to feel that way too, with our employees and with our own teams. So, sorry, I just went on a little rant there, but I think it'd be really cool to ask them, what do you need from us right now?
Right.
What can AFS or what can our company do for you that would be helpful and supportive, and just wanted to plug this in there too. I know this might be just an understood thing, but it's important to also remind people about the EAP programs that they have available to them, because people are in situations they've never been in before. I know that, not to get dark either, but a lot of domestic violence cases have increased and things like that, we never know what people are really going through. So to just offer all of the resources that we can and let them pick and choose what works best for them, I think is the best thing that we can do right now.
First, this is my chance to say ditto. Yeah, absolutely. And we're not going to go into Ghost. If you haven't seen the movie Ghost, you go see it. But ditto, absolutely. But I've had a pretty long career. I'm not ancient, but I've been around for a while. And I've worked for a lot of different companies. I was a consultant for a dozen years until just a few years ago. I've interviewed in a lot of places. And one of the things that I always talk about in interviewing, I always ask the same question. And one of them is, what do you do best? As an HR practitioner, I could say, employee relations or benefits or compensation or recruiting. I've never, ever said that. The answer I always say is communicate. I know how to communicate. I know how to put myself in the shoes of someone else and get people to understand each other and hear each other through each other's eyes, not their own eyes. Communication is so important. Tiffany, you were talking about listening. Listening is the foundation of every job, not just HR. The way we get through this is to listen to each other, which unfortunately in the national picture here right now, we're not very good at, not to go off in that realm, but listening is how we succeed. Businesses are learning, I think, through the pandemic, how to listen more to their employees and how to understand what they need and what they want a lot more. And they're willing to put their suggestions to use a lot more in these situations. Again, perhaps another silver lining to the issues, to what's happening. When we listen to each other and when we hear each other, which are two different skills, as I'm constantly reminded, we get more things done. And clearly at AFS, Tiffany, your company is doing a wonderful job at it. At FlossBar, whether it's our the COVID services that we provide or the dental services that we provide, we start every conversation with a client by saying, what do you need? Tell us what you need. We don't just say, this is what we got. Let me sell it to you.
Absolutely.
Every conversation starts with, what's going on at your company? What do you need? What would help you? And what we do may not help every company certainly not. But if more conversations started like that internally, I think that companies would be far more successful. Listening is absolutely the paramount building block to every successful story.
And every successful relationship. I think that
that's a different podcast. Behave.
I'm saying relationship is like employee-employer relationship. I think that, like you said, HR is a representative of the company, but also of the people. And I think that we're in a very unique position in that way, where we can be an advocate and have a voice if you are fortunate enough to have a leadership that supports that, or supports HR the way that it should. And I start off my conversations, if an employee comes to me with an issue or even to vent or anything, I always say, what do you need? What can I do? What do you want from me? So that way the expectations are clear, where I'm not guessing. And I think that is 1000%. And not listening to respond, listen to hear them, listen to understand their situation, and being empathetic to it. And I think that's the best thing we can do right now. Just with everyone is in uncharted territory. And I know people are so sick of hearing unprecedented times. I see also things like, I just miss precedented times. Like, I just miss normal. But I think that, like, I agree with you. I think listening is just such a powerful tool that not everyone uses.
The real results will be what we do with this going forward.
Yeah.
It's not how we're reacting to it now, because we're reacting to a situation and we're handling
It's new.
we're putting out a fire.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we handle it after the pandemic is over? What will that be like, and how many companies will learn good lessons and implement effective ways of doing business going forward?
And I think what I've learned for both of you on this conversation is that it almost sounds like the key to being a successful employer, retaining your employees and keeping them happy, is to almost treat them right now, and it really should be all the time, same way you would treat your clients, because they kind of are your clients.
They're your internal clients. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Well,
that's a very interesting point you make. We and it's the tie between what I think is HR and marketing. We present the company to potential clients in a certain way. Why wouldn't we present the company to our own employees the same way? Why do we need a different brand internally than we do externally? If we're proud of what we do, if we want to be successful, it should be the same branding. So that, to me, there's a very close tie between marketing and HR, which is another podcast. But that's
yeah,
important.
you're right.
Join us next time.
Yeah, but that could be a whole nother podcast. I appreciate you two coming on. I thought that was a lot of great information, and I really hope, and I think it will be a lot of helpful tips for some other HR professionals out there that might be struggling with what to do in the new workplace. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll have you back again.
Thank you.